What Drives Us Members Only. My name is Russell Frost, and I am your host for this special one-on-one with my friend, and I don't even know how to describe him on Twitter anymore. He's like a media powerhouse. But I'm going to start my introduction with this disclaimer. While this guest does work for this company named PAVE, which is what's PAVE?
Partners for Automated Vehicle Education.
Thank you. It was the partners were like, I knew automated vehicle education. Well, while Edward does work for them, he is not representing them here. So anything he says here is his personal opinion and not connected directly to PAVE.
That's right.
He is a well-known author who just released an updated, if I'm not mistaken, paperback version of his fantastic book, Ludicrous, The Unvarnished Story of Tesla Motors. Did that without notes. Thanks, Ed. Thanks. Which you should, if you don't already have, you should have and read because it's a fantastic book. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Mr. Edward Niedermeyer.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on, Russell. Always fun to chat, and it's been a minute.
It's been a while, and you know what? Honestly, I thought this was the best time to like approach this because I didn't have like a specific thing. The only specific thing I had, and I think I communicated it to you originally when we talked on Twitter, was I'm developing this sort of subdural annoyance. Oh, hey, with autonomy in general. And I know you can talk me down. I know you can put me on the right path. And why not? Why shouldn't I come to you for some positive reinforcement?
Well, it's a great topic. And listen, I mean, everybody I know who has paid close or does pay close attention to AVs has gone through, peaks and troughs, shall we say. The whole space has gone through peaks and troughs individually. Most people kind of, it's a big topic, and there's a lot to get excited about, but there's also a lot to get overwhelmed by, or even, some of what's happening in the space is in my view quite disillusioning. And so yeah, totally understand that. But like, maybe start what's your experience with this then?
So, I kind of feel like I'm behind the curve here, maybe not intentionally, which is odd because I do have my fingers in various sectors of, vehicles and autonomy and software and electronics, advanced technology, as it were. But it's hard to say. I mean, I kind of want to say, you know what, go develop it and just shut up about it until you've got it, until you can give it to me in a package with a ribbon on it and it works all the time. Shut up about it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't care about your spec. I don't care about your company. I don't care about your investors. I don't care about your developments. I don't care how many disengagements you had per million miles traveled yesterday or the day before or 2 years ago. When you have working AVs, let's talk. I'm so interested. I also feel like, so one of my pet peeves is car companies spending money on racing. And this is something that almost every other I'm not going to include myself as a journalist. I'm just a guy with a mouth and a microphone. But I think most racing money is wasted, and it's wasted to favor the egos of other corporate sponsors and themselves, and auto executives who love to be in a big shiny box on a race day and cars going by and they're like, we paid for that. And how cool is, you know what I mean? Like, it's all just like the most base kind of male sword fighting there is.
So racing is kind of an interesting topic. I've never been like a huge motorsport person myself, just kind of in general. I like driving. I've done a little bit of go-karting for fun or whatever, and I get the appeal as an activity, but sort of big motorsport has not really been that important or frankly interesting to me. But I think a lot of that and maybe a lot of what you may dislike about motorsport is actually, I think, tied to the fact that the auto industry has been becoming and has been really a very mature business for a very long time. And if you look at the history of the auto industry and racing and the role that racing plays in it, its most meaningful contributions have been in the earlier days, right? When the technology is immature. And I think that's there's actually some interesting, and Alex Roy and I have talked about this a little bit on the Autonocast, although not for a while, but I think when you do have new technologies coming into the automotive industry, whether it's electric or autonomous or what have you, that creates an interesting opportunity then to, well, is so you have like not fully matured technology, which means there could be pretty big discrepancies between different players, and the competition actually means something and actually drives the development of that technology. um, I think it opens the prospect for motorsports to be interesting again, but I don't know if we've quite figured out how to do that, because like I don't know that like robo race, for example, is a great idea. Like I love the idea, and certainly as someone who works in AV education, there's a lot to like about it, but I don't know that it's like exciting, compelling racing yet. But like I said, because the technology, whenever technology is immature, like racing starts to mean something again. And like the
Interesting.
most popular races, arguably, and obviously we live in such a different world now, it's hard to compare it, but there's worldwide coverage of the original, the first motorsport races were just, we're going to drive from this city to that city, and literally like if you can make it, you win, right? Or whoever makes it the farthest wins. And
Right.
eventually, right? But I mean, it was literally started out as just, can this new device called a car, can we actually drive it to the next big city, right? And so the technology was super immature, but because of that immaturity, and because of the long-term potential that people saw in the technology and the desire to see it accelerate and get better, there was just a ton of interest in in those kinds of races.
Uh, so I mean, and it's not just about it's. I just feel like they waste millions and millions and millions of dollars on this, and the excuse is always for racing.
Mm.
Oh well, we all that technology goes into the car. And you know what? I bet that most of the Corolla drivers out there in the world, or Sentra drivers, or Elantra drivers, no, they're not really benefiting from NASCAR or F1. You know what I mean? They're just because there's no magnesium, titanium, cobalt struts anywhere in that vehicle. Anything that expensive would be in a glass case in the showroom. Anyway, so it's wasted money.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is definitely wasted. I do think, I mean, there's certainly, so like Toyota, for example, like they do Le Mans racing with hybrid motors, right? And it's a way to highlight that and their leadership in that technology, and it's also a way to kind of push it to extremes and see what it's really capable of. Yeah, obviously, I don't think the hybrid drivetrain that they're using to race around Le Mans is going to be in a road car anytime soon, but I think, what you touch on is the broader challenge with racing right now in the sort of more mature automotive paradigm, and that is that it just doesn't have a lot of relevance, right? There's not a lot of stuff technology that's being pushed, to pushed forward by something like competition. And so, but I think that, like, again, as this sort of feeds my view that racing could become a lot better now, because there are newer technologies that are less proven, and I think there are ways that you could race. And like Formula E is a little frustrating to me, because everyone, I think, at my understanding, is basically has the same sort of battery and pack or whatever. So it's a very like it's really supposed to be more of a test of driver skill. But I think there could be other interesting possibilities for like electric and I think autonomous racing. I think we're a ways from that, but I think it could be
Robot
really
race,
good, if only, and
robot
actually,
racing,
well, so if only because one of the most messed up things about motorsport is that a lot of people like it for the crashes,
right?
and if there's no one in the vehicle, you can really, and again, this probably won't happen because of sponsorship and the other sort of commercial interest, but I think that, and I've been saying this for a while on Twitter, that a racing series of like autonomous vehicles that's like full on Ben-Hur, like Roman chariot, just like
Lances in the front,
crash fest. Yeah. And where, it is maybe even partially like demolition derby, but,
right?
but just a crash fest, because you don't have to feel bad about people getting hurt. No one gets hurt. Now, does it highlight the technology the way the companies want that technology to be highlighted? Probably not. And I think that's the problem.
I think my new Twitter tagline for you is going to be the Caligula of the automotive industry, And so let me bring this all back because this started with nothing about racing. I was just using it as an example, and I'm feeling like all of the billions of dollars being spent on autonomy right now. Obviously, some of that has to be spent. We want to have cars safer, and there are certain advantages one can argue that an autonomous vehicles of various kinds could bring to society. But let's be clear. In my opinion, I think the lion's share of this money is just being burned to try to be first, to try to get the most market share, to try and own the market, which is that sort of business paradigm, which of course is denied by the fact that we're supposed to live in a competitive capitalist system where no one ever owns the market, except that's not really the way it is. Did I get too off topic there?
No, I mean, you make some good points. I mean, first of all, the, believe
Really?
it or not, I mean, first of all, I think, in anytime you have competition, you're going to have waste because people are going to lose. Now,
Sure.
it's waste in the service of, having that competition hone so that the winning thing is better. So maybe, it's not necessarily a complete waste because it contributes to whoever wins the competition being better than they would have been otherwise. I also do, I would push back a little bit on the idea that anyone in the AV space is trying to get a monopoly. It seems like that was kind of what you were implying.
Very much what I was implying, yes.
Okay. I mean, you know, I guess anybody in any business would probably push come to shove, would like to have a monopoly. There are some advantages to that, but I actually think, and Alex Roy has written a bit about this in the context. You had a piece a little while ago about sort of comparing to elevators, but
Mm-hmm.
and I think the vision that most people in the space seem to have is that there will be at least, at a minimum, there will be a big three, but realistically, there could be quite a few more autonomous vehicle companies out there, and that's just talking about level 4 robotaxi. It's not trucking, right? There's a bunch of companies that just do autonomous trucking.
Right.
There's last mile delivery, right? Companies like Nuro. So I think one of the problems with AVs, and one of the things that gets people, I think, burnt out on them, is sort of thinking of them as self-driving cars, right? Like the car is this 100-year-old idea that's been reinforced and refined and defined, you know, with billions of dollars every year, right, for a century. So this is something that has been really well established. Whether we're super conscious about exactly what we're thinking about when we think about a car, it's definitely lodged in there, because you can't escape all of the ways in which cars are defined for us. And if you assume that AVs are sort of the next evolution of the car, right? It's a car, it just happens to drive itself. I think there are quite a few people who think that that's what's going to happen, who anticipate that. Certainly, we've seen Tesla monetize the desire for that. And
You said it first, by the way. Let the record show you said the T word before me.
It never happens to me.
Fair enough.
But I think that self-driving cars, and whether or not we will actually see truly a level 5 vehicle that you can buy and afford yourself, we don't know if we'll ever even see that. But I think that we do, and one of the things I try to do at PAVE, who, by the way, again, just don't represent here today. It's very hard to speak for an almost 70-member coalition of of companies, but one of our sort of educational priorities is precisely this. It's to get beyond this self-driving car thing. AVs are not just a new kind of car that will replace cars, right? I don't think we're going to move from we have a monoculture right now with mobility. The car dominates in this country. And I don't think that progress is replacing one monoculture with another. I think it's going to be much more a move from monoculture to more diversity. I think that if you look at AVs, right, there are so many form factors already out there, again, from semi-truck to little occupantless vehicles, right? I mean, without even a human being in them.
Starship, yeah.
Yeah, or they can look like a car. You know, there's a lot of opportunities. We're only at the very earliest stages of even understanding all of the diversity that AVs will manifest. And so I think that, you know, if you think about it in terms of being a car, it makes sense that it would be sort of more of a monopolistic thing, because even though it's not, cars aren't dominated by one company, they definitely dominate all other forms of mobility in this country. And I don't think that AVs are going to be that necessarily, at least not anytime soon.
So you don't, in your personal non-paved connected opinion, is all of the money being spent on AV development worthwhile? Or is, I mean, again, acknowledging that in any thing like this, there's going to be some waste. I'm not saying it needs to be perfect. I'm just saying, wow, the scale is staggering.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's much harder to say. The hard version of that question is sort of trying to say, you know, which companies definitely can and cannot be sort of viable or whatever. That's
Right.
really hard. But and also, you know, a company could have extremely good technology and talent and all the pieces that they need, but make mistakes in terms of their cap table and their investments, and it can just become a non-viable business because of mistakes, not because the technology wasn't viable. So, but I definitely do. I do think it's worth it, though, to actually answer your question. Like I do, you know, I think the reason, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'd like to hear more about why you feel the way you do. But I think that a lot of it, when people get disillusioned with AVs or with the idea really of AVs, it's just because expectations had gotten to be unrealistic, right? We've had people saying like, oh, you know, in 2016, there were a number of people saying that by 2020, you know, AVs would be on the road and everywhere, and, you know, a bunch of things. And that hasn't happened.
I do want to make one quick point. Pardon the interruption, Ed. You used a phrase, has gotten to be, very passively. Right. And I mean, we could lay the blame for the inflation of the balloon, not with the public begging for more AV information, but from or from AV companies, AV related companies who want more pub, who want to inflate their stock value or legitimately increase their stock value and their visibility.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, clearly, right? And this is something that we see a lot of with EVs. In fact, if anything, more so with EVs right now than AVs.
Touche.
You have a lot more EVs going public with SPACs and things like that. And there's a huge, I mean, I feel like I have to call it a bubble. And I'm personally, you know, glad that AVs are not quite so frothy. And in part because, you know, it's just not as close to being ready, right? And although with EVs, right, the question is not so much can we make good EVs, it's how many people are really going to, you know, be able to have all of their mobility needs met by an EV.
Right.
And so but I think with the AV, like the perspective that I think we should have, I really think we need to get away from this sort of idea. And look, as Americans, we see everything through the lens of being a consumer, basically. And that's how we've approached AVs. It was like the shiny, gigantic present under the tree that we just cannot wait to open, right? And we got so stuck in that way of thinking about it. And yeah, like there clearly were people who stood to gain by fostering that perspective, right? And as it's taken longer, you know, clearly that framework of relating to AVs isn't working super well. And that's why I think, you know, for me, the attitude is, you know, AVs, this fundamental technology is going to change our society in so many ways. It's not about the next 5 years or 10 years. This is a really century scale kind of transformation as I see it. And so when you start to think of it that way, really we need to be doing so much more. Basically, it's a good thing that the technology isn't ready because we're not ready as a society, in my view. I think that we have to do a lot more to educate ourselves and each other, and through that education, empower conversations, people to join sort of conversations where we as a society figure out what do we really want out of this technology? What do we want our relationship to be? Because it's that big of a change. Like, we need to be having those conversations yesterday.
Have we ever had a conversation like that about any innovation in the history of humankind?
We tend to not be so good at anticipating the problems. Yeah,
Absolutely.
And look, I think Silicon Valley culture really plays into that and plays that up, right? You don't get the kinds of bubbles that we see without it.
Right. Not to mention names. And by the way, I want to take this point in the show to mention that one of my favorite podcasts is one that Ed is a co-host of with Alex Roy and Kirsten Korosek, called the Autonocast, which you should look up and listen to, even if, like me, you want to bang your head against a wall when people start talking about EVs. It's a brilliant show. And if nothing else, it's funny to hear Kirsten and Alex argue back and forth sometimes.
Yeah, they're a sassy bunch.
I got nothing. I love my panel. And I enjoy yours a great deal.
Russell, can I like unpack something that you said for a sec? Because I think it's interesting, and I've actually been thinking a bit about this lately.
I said something interesting?
Yeah.
You've been drinking. Go for it.
The way you talked about AVs there, and I think it's similar to the way a lot of people, I've just been noticing this more and more, of like, what are AVs? AVs want to be a certain way, essentially, is the implication. Like, people aren't explicitly saying that, but there's this sense, and I think a lot of people approach AVs this way of like, I need to figure out what these really are, right? Because there is a very sort of happy, shiny narrative that was, wildly popular in 2015, 2016, that kind of era. And that narrative was not the whole story, obviously, right?
Sure.
On a number of dimensions. But to me, I think that we're already off to a bit of a bad start in the way that we talk about this stuff, because we tend to be looking for like it tends to be this idea that AVs are going to be one thing or another. They're going to be, and just to oversimplify it, they're going to be good or bad. And that there's something intrinsic to their nature, to the technology, that sort of determines whether it will be good or bad, and in what ways. Really, and again, this is back to the last point I was making, it's up to us. Like, it will be what we make of it. And I think that it's very easy to feel like AVs are like, and technology in general is, people in Silicon Valley come up with it and they unleash it on us, whether we want it or like it or whatever. So I think we're used to kind of having it passively imposed on us. And I think that the AVs are such an important and transformative technology that we can't just do that. We have to really be engaged and understand it as best we can, and understand what we want to see AVs become, and find ways to advocate for that, because this is how we relate to AVs is going to have so much of an impact on so many different aspects of our lives that it can't just be imposed on us. It needs to be something where we as a society have a broad-based conversation about it, and hear from a lot of different diverse perspectives in order to understand what is sort of the best way to develop this and distribute the benefits equitably.
Is there any company in the sector that is actually saying to people, whoever, hey, we want to know what you think? I mean, it feels like they're all just going off in a direction that they're going in, and I don't see a lot of like, this is what we're making. Want it?
It varies from company to company. Like, different companies have put more of an emphasis on that. And every company has its own culture. But no, absolutely. And I think it's sort of similar to like, you know, why a lot of people are like, well, when are AVs going to be here? Well, they are here. They're just not in your city. And I think, in the places where, and we've had a number of panels about this at PAVE, in places where deployments happen, I would say most AV companies absolutely do go out of their way to interface with the community. In fact, what we're told by a lot of people is that listening to the community is the first step of a deployment. So
Right. But by that time, Ed, they've got a product. This isn't AV company X going to a community and saying, we want to build autonomous vehicles for your community. What would you like? This is saying, we've got this bus, we've got this pod, we have this delivery thing on that looks like a cooler with a flag. We've got a car. Are you ready? Is that unfair? I don't mean to put you in the position to have to like run interference for the entire concept of autonomous vehicles either, Ed. But that's kind of the roles we're playing today. So.
Yeah. So I mean, again, there are degrees of all of this and variations, and I certainly don't want to portray the autonomous vehicle space as being monolithic about anything. In
sure.
Fact, that's the reason that I can't speak for PAVE, among others, is it's 70, organizations, all of which have different perspectives on basically everything that's not the importance of education. That's the one thing that all 70 can agree on. And I actually think that right there is telling, in the sense that, education is fundamentally, or at least how, we at PAVE are approaching it. It's fundamentally about empowering people to become stakeholders in the technology. We are all stakeholders in the technology, whether we want to be or not.
Yeah.
Technology is moving forward. It will, unleash huge changes. And that's why I think it's just, we should be glad that that's not already happening, that we still have some time in which to sort of create the conversations, the social, however it is that we figure things out collectively as a society. And I will say, I think, the fact that, as you alluded to, we as a society, certainly in terms of politics, but sort of in general, we don't seem to be very good at having broad social conversations and forming consensus. That is troubling to me.
Yeah. As a group of organisms, we're awful. Just like we run away from it every chance we have. And throughout history, whatever it is that has changed us forever, whether, again, any technological innovation from the seed drill to autonomous vehicles just happens. And that's part of the problem as I see it. And it's certainly not like, well, this is where it stops. Now we're going to take EVs first, and we're going to have a national referendum. I'm not being that silly, but
yeah, it would be more informal than that. Obviously, I mean, we don't have a
absolutely. You know what it was? I'll tell you, Ed. The catalyst for this, and forgive me because I don't remember the company involved, but I'm going through the news as I do for what drives us all the time, or I'm following something on Twitter and I see something. And the part that I don't remember is the EV/AV company's name, but it was like a fairly well-known EV company, and blah 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 something. Their AV has just announced that their brand new autonomous electric vehicle has been delayed for 2 years or something like. And I'm like, why? Just make the EV. You don't need to make it autonomous out of the gate. Just make the truck or the car or the bus or whatever it is. It doesn't have to have a robot behind the steering wheel for it to replace cars with humans.
Yeah, I mean,
humans can drive EVs.
Yep. I mean, and frankly, it's a weird confluence in a way that people associate electric and autonomous so tightly. I mean, and again, there's a wide variety of views on this. Some companies think it's super, super important. Others, definitely don't think that EVs are best for early deployments of autonomous vehicles, just because of the amount of power that they consume, and the challenges of having a limited range and slow recharging, which then cuts back your utilization rate, which affects, which you need to be maximizing in order to make the economics of such an expensive vehicle work. So yeah, I mean, but what you're referring to, this is not like a robo taxi or something. This is like a car that you can buy with some kind of autonomous function.
I guess I honestly don't remember what it was, but I just saw the article and I went, "Oh, I'm so sick of this." Like, just make the damn EV. It doesn't have. Again, it doesn't have to be a robotaxi or whatever it is. It can just be an EV. And I want to say it could have been Lordstown. Did Lordstown just do something?
I don't know that they've ever even talked about autonomous.
Yeah, that was the part. That's why for some reason I'm connecting to them, because I'm like, why did just make the truck? It's okay, kids. But anyway, again, a lot of this seems to be posturing. When compact discs started replacing records back in the early 80s, everybody put the word digital on everything. Literally, felt pens, everything had the word digital on it. Digital was the cool buzzword. And we get to a point where, as a society, buzzwords are a really compact way to communicate ideas and concepts and attribute things, whether they should be attributed to them or not. And, saying it's autonomous, well, that's better than just an EV. It's autonomous and it's an EV,
There's an interesting contradiction here, though, because last year at PAVE, we did a poll about sort of perceptions and attitudes towards EVs, and others have done similar kinds of polling, and it's generally not wildly positive.
Interesting.
People are not necessarily, I mean, there's always, a subset of people are love the idea and super passionate about it, but a lot of people just don't. A lot of people just don't see the appeal. And I think, a lot of times that'll be folks who live in rural areas who, for them, driving their truck is like the thing that they most enjoy doing in the day, and, they're not necessarily stuck in traffic all the time, like people who, commute in big cities and stuff. So on the one hand, like the perceptions are not wildly positive. And they're generally more positive for like partial automation than complete. And so I think a lot of it seems to be about control, and just sort of the idea of giving up control is just hard for people. But then on the other hand, and like I can't help but use Tesla as the example here. I mean, people want to believe so badly that those cars will be able to drive themselves that they ignore so much reality. I mean, the most recent thing were these DMV documents. Tesla said what it said, and people there had to be some secret system that we've never seen a video of, but it's definitely going to come. And it's not this one, it's something else. And like people are clearly, a lot of people, and again, this is not all of them, but this, and arguably maybe a pretty small minority, but there's a significant number of people are so anxious to see this technology that they're willing to suspend any kind of critical thinking about it.
I think you have to add in the greed factor and how much of a cash cow Tesla has been for again, a small but very vocal and influential group.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah. And look, I mean, I think that's why I'm kind of, part of me, given what's happened with EVs and SPACs and everything over the last couple of years, and Tesla, I'm kind of surprised, right? So we've had a number of people come along and basically really trying to obviously ape what Tesla has done, right? Nikola being the most sort of blatant example, like basically using the same name,
right?
But that's been all on the EV side. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop in like, when are we going to have autonomous vehicle startups come in and basically claim to be competing with Tesla? I don't know why we haven't seen that yet, because certainly I think if you look at the valuation, the only way to even begin to justify Tesla's current valuation, you really do have to assume that its vehicles will drive themselves and unlock all kinds of new economic possibilities.
We both know the answer to that question, or at least part of it. and that is without P.T. Barnum, it's just not a circus.
Yeah, but the thing is that once PT Barnum, is able to profit to the extent, and I mean profit in terms of the
Hugely.
valuation rise. I mean, Elon Musk has been the world's wealthiest man. Mostly because of Tesla. When and not only does he have a lot of benefits, but he also gets away with a lot because of what Tesla is and how it's been branded. And I think that if someone is able to do that, it's just a matter of time before more people do. And that's why more and more with Tesla, it's like, I'm not going to convince anybody that they're good or bad or anything else. But increasingly, Tesla is important because of the precedents it sets, the incentives that it puts in place for everyone else. And I think a lot of fans don't want to address that because
No.
they're willing to excuse everything that Elon does. But when you start to realize that if you're excusing him, you're not just excusing him. Anybody now, it's right. If we live in a even remotely egalitarian society, whatever you're willing to let Elon Musk get away with, you can't really go after other people for doing the same thing, right? Or at least you shouldn't.
Unfortunately, we're not nearly that consistent. But yeah, and I mean, years ago on What Drives Us, that was my exact concern that I expressed about the Techno King, was that, yeah, he would be a bad example. He would besmirch, he would tarnish a category that was super important for us as a country, as a society, and mostly not for any greater good, but for his own benefit. And that's my opinion.
Yeah, I want, and I think it's interesting that when you are critical, when I am critical about full self driving, as I've
Oh,
been in pretty clear terms, it's always the response is always like you're against the technology or you're standing
right.
in the way of progress. I even had some fairly well known just recently tell me that people are soft pedaling AV technology. I'm sorry, slow playing AV technology for reasons that were not really well explored at all. Um, but like that, it's always that. And in reality, the people who are most critical of Tesla, certainly in the automotive or AV business, um, that the main concern is that what they're doing will put the entire technology at risk. They see they see criticism of the things that Tesla is doing as being necessary to actually protect the technology, and yet it's being perceived as the opposite, right? It's competitors trying to hold them up or whatever.
Well, I mean, to again, I hate to see Tesla's necessary for their business model grasp for FSD ruin the idea that, wow, there is an American company that can make cool EVs. If they just focus on making cool EVs, they'd be out of business because, yeah, I don't know. I hate it when I refute my own argument. Damn it. He has to be a lying fraudster to make it.
I mean, honestly, if you look at where full self driving, I think we may have discussed this on an earlier interview, but when full self driving was announced, not only was there they had lost Mobileye as a supplier, but there was also the situation where they were having to start to discount their cars, which they really kind of avoided doing before. I mean, they would, a little bit here and there at the end of the quarter, but like that Q3 of 2016, they really started that you could see that, their discounting and demand was still kind of a little bit shaky. And what full self-driving was able to do, it allowed them to sell cars, right?
Right.
It said now if you want the latest and greatest Tesla, you have to get a new one because it's going to drive itself. Um,
Someday, yeah.
and yeah,
It's the best. I mean, you pay $8,000 to $10,000 for a feature that doesn't work, and if you trade the car in,
you you don't get it.
it's gone like magic. Like, poof, it's gone. But you can buy it again because this car has even better hardware.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so now, yeah, I mean, the biggest question about all of this is like, what is the end game? Like how does, right? Like if you assume, and I do full self-driving in terms of being a level 5 autonomous driving system
Right.
that operates at a level of safety that allows you to get in the back seat, and not have to be behind the wheel. I just, you know, we live in a universe of infinite possibilities, but I think that there's a vanishingly small likelihood that that happens. But then the question is, you know, if people are just willing to excuse them forever or continue to believe that it's right around the corner forever, in theory, this could go on indefinitely, I guess.
Okay. Before we wrap up, I want to give you, Mr. Niedermeyer, a chance to talk about something any any place you want to go, any comments you want to make that with or without COVID Karen or his car company?
I mean, yeah, I think it's interesting just to stick with the space Karen for a moment. It is interesting that you know I mean, so like not doing radar anymore, right? Like
Yeah.
he just said in a tweet, we're just not even going to use radar anymore.
because
Um,
because cameras should be better than eyes. Or he didn't say this, but I mean the implication is that like because eyes can do it, cameras can do it. It's like
yeah. And he also had another tweet a while ago too that was sort of implying that that Tesla was having to master what he called physical world AI, and by which my interpretation is like sounds like something getting close to AGI, so general intelligence,
okay.
which doesn't exist, right? But and it's like the whole right that will be the singularity is when we develop an intelligence that genuinely can't be distinguished from a human, and so it's like both of those things are absurd. There's no reason not to use radar, if only as a redundancy, but also for diversity, so that fog and low light where cameras don't work well, radar is good at that, right? There's no reason to get rid of it except to push a narrative, and essentially he's just continues to double down and double down and double down, and it's so weird to me that people can be frustrated that it's taken so long for AVs to get here. And at the same time, which obviously is a product of the fact that they're really, really hard to develop,
Yeah.
but they can also at the same time believe that, a development effort, which is using, literally the bill of materials is in the hundreds of dollars for full self-driving, at least for the sensors. And everyone else is doing six figures, right? That and that you can do that with no redundancy, and that's going to work where everyone else has failed. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
I've been a photographer since I was a wee tot. And anytime someone says that eyes and cameras are kind of the same thing and should do exactly the same thing, I don't think understands eyes or cameras. And I'm not an engineer, but wait, neither is he. But yeah, that was a really bad. And again, it's that sort of polluting the stream with bad information that we don't need. That's what frustrates me about him. I don't care that he's doing what he's doing and people love his cars and all that. That's wonderful. Yay for them. I just wish they weren't beta testing. What is Creative Streets? What is FSD called now?
City streets.
City Streets. Thank you. City Streets. Right. Just wish he was beta testing City Streets, maybe somewhere on another continent.
Yeah, the misinformation thing is really sort of more and more the thing about it that I really that really it gets me actually mad. The rest of it, it's like if people want to get ripped off, like okay, like there should be
Absolutely.
there should be consumer protections for sure, but if they're in this voluntarily, great, keep waiting. Like you're gonna wait forever, but if that's what you want, go ahead. and do it. Your faith can sustain you. But when it gets to the point where, maintaining that narrative requires actively spreading misinformation about LiDAR, about mapping, about some like really fundamental aspects of this technology, I think then, you're working against our ability as a society to collectively make good decisions about this technology.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty unforgivable. And it's basically impossible for me to look at someone who would do that and believe for a second that they have any kind of altruistic intent. It's just, it's being done for one reason.
Yeah. I don't have any time for people anymore that think the mission is a real thing. Speaking of that, here's something totally off topic. Have you seen anything anywhere about Tesla solar roofs being installed?
I have not.
Okay. I haven't either. I was just curious. And I don't want us to both, we could speculate, but boy, did that get quiet again.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, the number one response when people say, well, compared to every other automaker, Tesla's overvalued, and they say, well, it's not, it's an energy company, right? And like, to be an energy company, you should, some significant percentage of your revenue should come from energy, right? It's been at most a couple of percentage points of their revenue. So, again, it's the narrative, right? The narrative is more important than any of the underlying reality.
It's the worst halo grabbing. Just like, oh yeah, we're an energy. And the Mega Pack in Texas. Where are they getting those batteries? I thought they were what supply constrained, demand constrained? Which is it? Make up your mind.
Yeah, well, I think saying that you're supply constrained, even as you cut prices, is a little bit of a tough sell.
They'll make it up in volume. No, wait, that's why I didn't make it in business, Ed. I didn't get it. Anything else you want to wrap up with, my friend? Any other ideas? Did I let you finish that thought?
Yeah, no,
okay.
Absolutely.
There's
a lot of things we could discuss if you want, but
no, I mean, dude, we could be here for the rest of the afternoon, and absolutely. Then it just wouldn't work out. I do want to say once again how much I'm enjoying. Things have changed at work now, so I can listen to podcasts, and I've been getting caught up on literally a couple of years of the Autonocast, and it's a brilliant show. It's really well done. I do want to smack Alex sometimes, and about equal number of times I want to give him a big hug too.
Yeah.
So that's Alex, right? I've never met him, but he's both adorable and really irritating.
Did you start at the beginning and work up, or are you just sort of jumping around? Or
yeah. Okay. So I think, how long have you been on now? Forgive me for not knowing. 3 years?
I don't remember. It's at least 3 years. I think.
Okay.
Over 4.
I feel like it's 3 or 4. So the first year or year and a half, I listened to everything when it came out. And then, so there's like 2.5 years that I've just been kind of spotty on, and I've been going backwards.
Okay. I was just going to say, especially, the show really started, this was before Kirsten actually joined. It was me and Alex and this guy, Damon Lavrent.
Right.
And in those days, most of the episodes that we did, we didn't have interviews or anything that came later. It was mostly me and Alex fighting about Tesla. With Damon, refereeing. And I actually kind of want to go back and listen to some, because I suspect I may have been a little bit more right in retrospect than he was. Ooh. Although we both learned a lot from each other.
It is, you know what? I'll poke this bear. It is surprising how much purchasing a Tesla can change your outlook. How much more positive you could be reinforced about something you've invested, say 60 grand or more in.
I mean, Alex likes his Tesla, but certainly when it comes to full self-driving, he is he works for an autonomous vehicle company. He is not taken in for a second. Of course, he bought it anyway. He bought the option so that he could have a front row seat to see the development as it happened in real time, which frankly, if you work in that space, I get that. That makes sense. And frankly, if you work in that space, you probably have enough money to be, 10 grand is not going to be,
Alex
as
doesn't
big
care.
a deal as it might be to some of the rest of us. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Alex has always had, there are things about Tesla that he really, really likes, and there are things about Tesla that he really doesn't like. I think he's actually, if you go back and listen to some of those early episodes, I'm talking about the really, really earliest ones, you may find that his view has changed a lot. He was, I think, much more positive about Tesla back then.
Really?
Just kind of universally so, and just sort of inclined to defend them.
Interesting.
I don't want to take credit for making Alex Roy a skeptic, but
no. No, I mean, I think Alex is a realist too. I'm not saying, I would never describe him as a fanboy unless he's talking about those Morgans, which I just don't understand. But anyway.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about Alex too, is he has very unique tastes, including things like Morgan three-wheeler. I mean, Morgan three-wheeler is a three-wheeled British car. This is not the kind of vehicle that someone buys if they care about, reliability and practicality and things like that. So
he lives in New York. Well,
he actually lives in Miami now.
Oh, I didn't know that he moved.
He did.
Oh, wow.
So, which, makes a certain amount of sense given that Argo, who he works for, is going to be deploying in Miami.
In Miami.
Well, city, yeah.
There you go. Now he can drive that Morgan whenever it's not raining, which is every day except between 3 and 5 p.m. when it pisses down rain. Once again, though, the Autonocast, if you're not already subscribed and listening, do check out Ed's show. It's really well done. What I respect is the blend of the triumvirate that show has evolved between Ed and Alex and Kirsten. They're both very different people. They come from different places. They do different things, and that mixture is absolutely delightful and always informative and always interesting. So.
Well, thank you. You're way too kind. We should get you to do our publicity.
I think you should. And with that note, I'm just going to say thanks again to Ed. You can again look for his book, "Ludicrous: The Unvarnished Story of Tesla Motors." Wherever you buy books, hopefully it's a local independent. If not, buy it on Amazon or whatever. Who cares? Life's too short.
Yeah.
I don't really mean
just
that.
Buy it. That's
just
the important thing.
Buy it. Yeah. Look at that. Buy Ed a new bookshelf, for God's sakes.
Yep.
Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.